Winning new business in today's competitive marketplace is not easy. It's a constant challenge for sales and marketing agencies. The challenge is examined in a book called Death of the Salesman. It's a new book written by some former CPM executives. Alex Mackay and Graham Brown, welcome.
Thanks, Damien. Nice to be here.
Now, the purpose in writing this book, Alex, can you give us a bit of background?
Well, I guess we started off, Graham and I and Neil, our co-author, over sort of 20 years, spending a lot of time in front of clients and being given a varied number of reasons for why they would or would not outsource their sales force. So we started to think about perhaps some of the deeper reasons. Why were some clients very successful in doing it and others reluctant to do it? Some had a very broad view of their sales function, and others were very narrow, thinking it was perhaps the man with the bag from the old days. So we set about doing some work to answer the question. Essentially, is why do people outsource their sales force, and why do they not, and who does, and who's successful? And I guess, Graham, you can talk about the research and why we had to keep it somewhat impartial.
Yeah, well, obviously credibility was absolutely crucial. And we realised to do that we needed to do some external research, I guess. We approached two academically based organisations because they carry that sort of credibility, plus the research that they do on an ongoing basis. We first spoke to the Australian Centre for Research Studies in Australia. We then spoke to the Portsmouth University Business School, and both of them undertook some really comprehensive studies. In fact, the first and the most, we believe, probably the most important studies that they'd ever done in terms of outsourcing of the sales function. We interviewed over 20 international businesses, and we had quantitative research with about 180. So an extensive body of research, the most done on the subject that we know of. And what we did was we actually used a lot of that fact-based information in the book, and a lot of the facts and empirical evidence that's there is actually credible from our perspective.
So some of the key findings.
I think the most critical one, the one that surprised us to some extent, was that something like 70% of businesses will outsource some of their business functions, and they're critical business functions. We're talking IT, we're talking research, we're talking things like that. And yet only 12% of organisations would consider outsourcing a sales function. And that kind of surprised us, but it also said we had something to deal with, and we sort of were onto something. So that was really important.
I suppose there's a real challenge in maximising value, but still trying to minimise cost.
Many of the clients for a number of years have what I call cheese sliced their business. Everyone's got pretty good at cutting cost, and really the challenge now is to maximise revenue. What the research showed us were really the fears of those clients in outsourcing their sales department. And the first fear was that they thought, well, we really don't have a lot of experience or an individual with the experience to do that sort of work in our business. Secondly, we're concerned that we perhaps don't have the rigour and we're not authentic enough to look across our entire organisation. We can cut a bit here and cut a bit there and cut a few people off the sales force, and it's a lot safer than perhaps looking at the sales function as a challenge. And thirdly, they said, and how the hell do we go from where we are today to where we need to be in the future? I've got 200 people working here. Are you suggesting that I sack them and you hire them, or you have an alternative?
You talk about outsourcing and particularly the skill sets of people who are then to be engaged. There seems to be some sort of concern around low-skilled jobs and roles. Can you just tell me a little bit about that and the concerns that you may have in that area?
One of the key myths that we'd been given was that people felt that outsourced organisations had less loyal or lower skilled people. And in fact, as many of the people watching the interview will know, particularly in the European theatre, that a lot of that base level merchandising and sales support has been outsourced, much so compared to places like the Asia Pacific. But the real issue behind that is that the European businesses are now authentic and much more convincing. They have high quality personnel. They have sophisticated IT systems. They have strong HR departments, and they are extremely focused on delivering sales outsourcing as a capability. And they probably weren't that 10 years ago. They were a cheaper alternative whereas now they are a competitive alternative. And I think that's really the positive that we found in the research, is that the businesses are now what they were saying they were 10 years ago, and we now have this nexus arriving. We've tended to find in our experience that a client first of all wants to know that you understand their industry and that you have a deep vertical understanding. They want to also know that you understand their business and the challenges and the things that keep them awake at night. They probably then want some sort of method. They want to see that you have previous examples of where you've worked in that industry. They want to see people who are their peers and brands who have used those sorts of services. And the book certainly gives a lot of those examples. And lastly, they want to know how you're going to deliver it through their people, not just through your outsourced organisation. If we assume again, or we accept that out there at the moment there is a sales function, whether internal or external, that is being delivered somewhere between minimally acceptable and polished delivery. What the book does is start a conversation about best imaginable. It talks about a level beyond what's currently being delivered and a way that clients can find a competitive advantage, because we've got great case studies as an organisation that are believable and are authentic, and when they're put in front of organisations around the world, they go, gee, I had no idea you could do that in that industry. We've just been busy cutting costs or trying to look for an alternative, but doing the same re-engineering. So the benefit of the book is it starts a conversation with the client that makes them think. And I guess, Graham, we haven't met a client that hasn't said to us in the last 20 years, I want you to challenge my thinking and I want you to come up with new ideas.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, the book is called Death of the Salesman. Alex and Graham, thanks for your time.